So I've been talking about DACs a lot recently. That's because a lot of DACs have been coming my way for review. I recently just reviewed the Dana Fripp's Pontus 15th, the Holome KTE, which I've had a lot of requests to review. I finally got that done just recently. The Nagra Tube DAC, this Summit Phi end of the road, top of the heap DAC, still in the house here, testing it with the new Nagra Streamer. A lot of DACs have come through this room, the Live Harmony, the Chord Dave. I can't even remember even half of the DACs I've had through here, but I can remember the ones that left an imprint on my heart, the ones that were special. And one of the ones that were really special from 2 or 3 years ago was the Weiss DAC 501. But today I want to talk about the new Weiss 501 Mark II. Now, last year when it was coming out, or over the year, it was being called the Weiss DAC 501 4-channel. Now, this is not a DAC for multi-speaker listening. This is not a multi-channel, DAC for a surround system or anything. It's a 2-channel DAC. But what makes the Mark II unique in the 501 is the fact that it uses 2 DAC chips per channel. So 2 DAC chips for the left, 2 DAC chips for the right. The original 501, I believe, just used a single DAC chip per side. So now we have 4 times the DAC chips, but there's also some refinements that have been made. And yes, this does sound different and better than the 501 original. I'll tell you what's changed, where these improvements have been made, and whether or not this DAC may be right for you. Let's talk about the Weiss DAC 501 Mark II. So several weeks ago, I received a message from bluebirdmusic.com. They asked if I wanted to review the Weiss DAC 501 Mark II. So Bluebird Music distributes a lot of high-end gear, and they represent some really fine brands. Weiss is one of them. So Bluebird Music said, hey, I'll send you over that 501 Mark II if you want to check it out and possibly review it. So of course, I said yes. So I want to thank bluebirdmusic.com. Without them, I would not have had the chance to hear this DAC, and I'm so glad I heard it, and I'm going to tell you why. So I've been listening to this 501 Mark II for the last several weeks in a system comprised of my Pure Audio Project Duet 15 speakers. I also have the Borison X2 on hand, and I have a pair of Audio Craftsman Victoria here from Palmer Audio. And all 3 of these speakers are different, unique, and they all sound beautiful. I've been listening with the Electro Compagnie ECI 6DX Mark II integrated, also a set of Singzer mono amps that are $1,400 a pair, Class AB, and also the T Plus A PA 3100 HV integrated amp. I also have and used the HiFi Rose RS130 streamer as well as the Nagra streamer, brand new, into the Weiss 501 Mark II. So when this DAC arrived, I remembered opening the original Mark I. I'll just call the original the Mark I. And I remember the packaging was really nice. It came in a nice sturdy box, well designed. It was well padded inside, and the Mark II is the same. It comes in the same box, except I noticed the box for the Mark II is white, where the Mark I, the box I had, was black. No big deal. But the DAC is wrapped professionally and perfectly within its packaging. It's even in a little silky type cocoon cloth. And once you take it out, what you see is the same exact little squat box of the Mark I. In fact, nothing has changed in the looks of the Mark II. It doesn't even say Mark II on the faceplate. It just says DAC 501. The inside of the DAC 501 is what has been changed a bit here. And Daniel Weiss added new DAC chips. He now uses the Sabre 9038 Pro DAC chips. I think the current Pro DAC chips from Sabre are the 9039s. So this is right under the current flagship DAC chip, but there's 4 of them here in the Weiss 501. But don't take the DAC chip as a representation of how a DAC will sound. There's so much more to a DAC's design than just the chip. There's the implementation of these chips. There's the power supply being used, the analog stage, the design, the parts used. All of this contribute to the sound output of a DAC, and not all DACs sound the same. This Weiss DAC 501 Mark II comes in at around $12,000, and it is a professional studio-like tool with a full suite of DSP algorithms here that allow you to tailor the sound to your room. Now, you can defeat all of these, as I do when I listen to the 501, because as much as a big feature that this is for this DAC, and it's so usable for so many people in their rooms, for me, I just like to listen to the 501 as a DAC. So all those algorithms are still there if you so choose to use them. Kind of like the vinyl emulation with some tracks, but that's only if you have speakers, maybe you want to warm it up a bit. But there's also the room EQ in there. You can EQ everything to your room. If you have a bass node that's just booming and hurting your ears, you can dial that into the EQ there and eliminate that bass node. So it's pretty remarkable, the set of tools here, and they're all professional tools. Remember, Daniel Weiss, the guy who designs these, won a Grammy for his work in sound. So this guy knows what he's doing, and you can tell immediately as soon as you plug in a Weiss DAC. But let me talk about first, say you own a 501 Mark I, or you're considering the 501, because it does come in at around $10K, $2,000 less than the Mark II. It's still a current product. What are the differences in sound between the Mark I and the Mark II? Let me get that out of the way first, and then I'll do some other quick comparisons with other DACs. The Mark II seems to have a little more bass heft, and as impressive as the 501 original was, the Mark II somehow takes any speaker I hook up to the system, and it seems to awaken the bass driver more so than any other DAC, even any other amps I have. Usually I equate amplifiers with bass power, but here the DAC is really wakening up those bass drivers, and it's not just putting out boom, it's putting out tight controlled bass, but there's more of it. So no matter what DAC I put in after the 501, that bass performance drops down to a normal level. This is almost like an enhancement, but it sounds really good because it fills out the foundation of the music. It sets that foundation. As we go up to the mid-range, it's really, really silky, and that's the word I want to use, silk. But yet there's immense resolution in that mid-range, and the details are all there, just as they are with, say, DACs in the $20,000 range. You're not going to not hear these details. These hidden details can come out in an ethereal way where you didn't quite hear it as well with, say, DAC A, but with DAC B, say the 501 Mark II, you're hearing these sounds much easier. The treble is elevated a bit, but it's not hard, it's not bright, or it's not lean. This DAC is the opposite of lean. So if you're worried about buying a lean sounding DAC, the 501 Mark II is the opposite. It's full bodied, it's full throated. The 501 Mark II has a special sound. It still has that studio vibe going on, like I mentioned with the Mark I, that studio tape vibe, like you're there in the studio listening and you're a fly on the wall and you get to hear all the sounds that you might not have heard with another DAC. But at the same time, it does so with life, with body, with emotion. This is a DAC that can connect you emotionally to the music. But the 501, no matter what version you go to, is a beautiful, refined sounding high-end DAC. The Mark II just takes everything that the 501 gives, all that good stuff, and it gives you more of the good. So more foundation to the music, more spatial, those reverb trails that we like to hear, almost sometimes with some music and those cymbals, it sounds like particles floating into the air. This DAC can do that in the treble area. Now, it's a sound that is really, really correct, right? Like I said, studio-like. You're going to hear the music like it should be heard. There's no real color added here, but there is a sound. There's that Weiss sound here, and it's that hefty, beautifully detailed, beautiful resolution type of sound. I'm going to compare it to a couple of other DACs here in a second, which will kind of maybe make it clearer of how this DAC can sound. This DAC is also a preamp. You can hook it up, as I did, to a pair of monoblock amps like those Singzer SA90s. They're 100 watt per channel into 8 ohm Class AB monoblocks that sell for $1,400. I hooked up the Weiss 501 Mark II, used it as a preamp. Comes with a really nice remote, so you can work the volume from your seat, and it sounded fantastic, if not a little soft. but those amps are warm, they're beefy, they're not the most resolute amps I've heard, but they give a very big pleasing sound. And for their price of $1,400, hook that up to the Weiss 501, I was getting a beautifully rich sound, and I was hearing that Weiss character come through. The details were a little subdued from the amps, the resolution was a little subdued from the amps, but overall they are amazing for the money. But as a preamp, I really enjoyed the Weiss 501. The 501 Mark II, just like the Mark I, is Roon ready. If you use Roon, and a lot of audiophiles do, a lot of music lovers use Roon, it'll implement very easily because it has its own Roon mode. You just set it to Roon ready mode, and away you go. So this deck has that covered as well. So you have the DSP where you can EQ your room, you can set up a vinyl emulation, you can tweak your headphone listening through that if you so desire. It's a preamp, right? And it's a world-class digital to analog converter, a world-class DAC right here. There's many companies, many brands that sell DACs that are $50,000, $100,000, $25,000. So where does that Weiss sit being at $12,000? Well, when I compared it directly to the Nagra Tube DAC for about a week straight, I would listen for a day or two with the Weiss, then a day or two with the Nagra, then 4 hours with the Nagra, then 4 hours with the Weiss. They sound completely different, but they are both stunning DACs. The Weiss has a little more energy and attack. It's a little more dynamic. It's a little more forward. I should say a lot more forward than the Nagra. It has more energy, more punch. When you're listening to, say, hard rock or metal, you'll hear more force behind the drums, behind those power chords with the Weiss. When you're listening to a female jazz performer, say, for example, you'll hear a little more crispiness and life or aliveness in the voice region, in that mid region, where the Nagra is going to present a silky, smooth, expansive, suck you in kind of sound. The Nagra is about immersiveness. It's not about attack. It's not about dynamics, even though they're there. It's more about taking you into your own world of music and having that music surround you in a mellow, subdued way. Even when listening to rock music on the Nagra, it's got energy and crunch and balls, but it still has a way of mellowing that out and just allowing you to envelop yourself in that music. It might not be a sound for everyone, but I love that kind of experience. The Weiss being what, $30, $40, $38,000 or so less expensive than the Nagra, brings more punch, more life, more vigor, more excitement, more crispiness in the mids, a little more excitement in the treble, and a lot more oomph in the bass. But the Nagra has a much wider sound stage, a much taller sound stage, and a much deeper sound stage. The Weiss sound stage is wide. It goes about to the end of the speakers, really. And most of the imaging of the Weiss sits in between the speakers. It's kind of precise, though not analytical. The Nagra stretches things out into the room. It's a different experience. But some people will prefer the sound of the Weiss because it has that just punch, energy, vibe, makes you get up, where the Nagra will make you be like, whoa, this is beautiful. So two different presentations, but the Weiss is not any lesser than the Nagra. They're just different presentations. There is value in pricier gear as long as it performs to a much higher level than it costs, or if it brings you complete and total satisfaction. So there is value in DACs such as the Weiss 501, big value, because it's a DAC that you may get, and it sounds like no other DAC I've heard. I've heard a ton of DACs, and DACs in the higher end realm sound completely different from each other usually. DACs in the mid-tier sound different, but they're more closer than different, and DACs in the couple $100 range and under all sound the same to me. But once you get into these exotic DACs, it's about the implementation, the engineering, the parts used, the way the power supply is done. And Daniel Weiss has done everything here in the 501 series remarkably well. The next DAC up from this, and the flagship DAC from Weiss, is the Weiss Helios, which I think comes in at around $10K more than the Mark II 501. It's $22,000. I've never heard the Helios, but maybe one day I will. But I have no doubt that if I had the Helios here, it would be even more refined and offer more beauty than the 501. Because one thing I found is, you know, there's this exotic level of hi-fi, but once you dip your toes into there just to hear it and try it, it makes it hard to go back because you hear what is possible. And that's what products like these do. They show you what is possible within your audio system. In any case, the Weiss DAC 501 Mark II is an incredible high-end DAC. It's just so refined. It's built by a guy who's won a Grammy for sound. He knows his stuff. Daniel Weiss knows his stuff. And this is one of the finest DACs on the market, in my opinion, regardless of cost. You can spend a lot more, you're just going to get different. And if you spend a lot less, you're going to start hearing some of those things that you really only notice once you hear a DAC like the Weiss. You know, those traces of digital noise and hash and stuff that kind of doesn't sound the best once you heard something that does it without those things. I don't know if I'm making much sense to you guys, but yes, the Weiss DAC 501 Mark II is remarkable. It's a fantastic high-end DAC. It has the same flavor of the original 501. It just brings you more and more of everything that was good about the 501. It's really phenomenal, and it's hard to believe it's in this little black squat box. Now, this is not a DAC I would recommend to go out and spend $12K on if your system costs in its entirety $5 or $10K. This is a DAC for a system with gear that is comparable to it. So you're going to want a nice amplifier. You're going to want a nice set of speakers. You're going to want a decent streamer, because streamers do make a difference. I'll touch on that really quick. When using the HiFi Rose RS130, which has been my reference for the last 14 months, when I use that going into the Weiss DAC 501 Mark II, I hear a little more of an incisive presentation in the imaging and sound stage. Vocals and instruments are a little more cut out and brought forward with the HiFi Rose. When I plug in the new Nagra streamer, which is absolutely unique in the way it does things. It's such a minimalist streamer, but it's such an amazing streamer with sound quality. It has a completely different approach, a different sound signature. With the Nagra going into the Weiss, the sound is a little more open, expansive. It still has those amazing details and resolution, but it's not as incisive as the Rose. It's a little more natural and musical, and it brings some of that Nagra flavor to the Weiss, which is crazy. So streamers do make a difference. So if you have a decent streamer, you have a decent amp, and you're looking for that, this is it, digital front-end system, take a look at the Weiss 501 Mark II. Try to audition it if at all possible. I know that's not easy for a lot of people. It's something that I can't do. I don't have any dealers around here. But you can find dealers online of Weiss. And again, this came from bluebirdmusic.com. Check out their website. They represent some amazing brands in hi-fi. And maybe I'll be able to review some of these things coming up here shortly from Bluebird. So I want to again thank Bluebird Music for this opportunity. For all of you watching, I thank you for watching. If you like this video, thumbs up and subscribe. I have a few more reviews, maybe 2 or 3 more reviews before the end of this month I'm trying to squeeze in, so stay tuned for those. Be sure you hit that notification button, otherwise you won't know when I upload a video. And that's about it. I will see you guys soon. And I love you all, and have a wonderful rest of your day or night.